The King Who Would See Paradise, from Andrew Lane's Orange Fairy Book. Once upon a time there was a king who came upon a holy man, or fakir, in a lonely place in the mountains. The fakir was seated on a little old bedstead, reading the Koran, with his patched cloak thrown over his shoulders. The king asked him what he was reading. The fakir he was reading about paradise and praying he might be worthy to enter there. Then they began to talk, and the king asked the fakir if he could show him a glimpse of paradise, for he found it impossible to believe in what he could not see. The fakir replied that he was asking a very difficult and perhaps dangerous thing, but that he would pray for him, and perhaps he might be able to do it. But he wanted the king against both the dangers of his unbelief and his curiosity that prompted him to ask this thing. However, the king was not to be swayed, and he promised the fakir always to provide him food if he in return prayed for him. To this fakir agreed, and so they parted. Time went on, and he sent the old heir's food according to his promise, but whenever he sent to ask him when he was going to show him paradise, always replied, "Not yet, not yet." After a year or two had passed, the king heard one day that the fakir was very ill, believed to be dying. Suddenly he hurried off that it was true, and that the fakir was even breathing his last. There and then the king besought him to remember his promise to show him a glimpse of paradise. The dying fakir replied if the king would come to his funeral, and when the grave was filled and everyone else away, he would come and lay his hand upon the grave. He would keep his word and show him some paradise. At the same time, he implored the king not to do this, but to be content to see paradise when God called him there. Still, the king's curiosity was so aroused he would not give way. Till the fakir was dead and had been buried, the king stayed behind when all the rest went away. Then when he was quite alone, stopped forward and laid his hand upon the grave. Instantly the ground opened, and the astonished king peered in. He saw a flight of rough steps, and at the bottom of them the fakir sitting just as he used to sit, on his rickety bedstead, reading the Koran. At first the king was so surprised and frightened that he could only stare, but the fakir beckoned to him to come down, so mustering up his courage he boldly stepped down into the grave. The fakir rose and signed to the king to follow, walked places on a dark passage. Then he stopped, turned solemnly to his companion, and with a movement of his hand drew aside a heavy curtain, revealing what, no one knows what was there, shown to the king. But when the fakir at length dropped the curtain and the king turned to leave the place, he had his glimpse of paradise. Trembling in every limb, he staggered back along the passage and stumbling up the steps, out of the tomb into the fresh air again. The dawn was breaking. It seemed odd to the king that he had been so long in the grave. It appeared only a few minutes ago that he had descended, passed along a few steps to the place where he had peeped beyond the curtain, and returned again after perhaps 5 minutes of that wonderful view. And what was it he had seen? His brains to remember could not call to mind a single thing. How curious everything looked, too. His own city, which he was now entering, seemed changed and strange to him. The sun was already up when he turned into the palace gate and entered the hall. A chamberlain came across, asked him why he sat unbidden in the king's presence. "But I am the king," he cried. "What king?" said the chamberlain. "The true king of this country," he replied. Then the chamberlain went away and spoke to the king, who sat on the throne, and the old king heard words like mad, age, and compassion. King on the throne called him to come forward, and as he went, he caught sight, reflected in the polished steel shield of the bodyguard, and he started horror. He was old, dirty, and raged. His long white beard, locks were unkempt, and staggered all over his chest, shoulders. Only one sign of royalty remained to him. That was the signet ring upon his hand. He dragged it off with fingers and held it to the king. "Tell me who I am," the old king cried. "This is my signet, which once sat where you sit, even yesterday." Looked at him passionately on the signet ring with curiosity. Then he looked at dusty records and archives of the kingdom, old coins of previous reigns, paired them faithfully. At last the king turned old man and said, "Such a king as this, whose signet ring you have, reigned 700 years ago, but he is said to have disappeared. Where did you get the ring?" And the old man understood that he, who was not content to wait patiently to see paradise, had been judged already. He turned and left the hall without a word and went into the jungle. Here he lived a life of prayer and meditation for 25 years, till at last the angel of death came and mercifully released him, purged and purified through his punishment. Wow. So basically, I guess the lesson is don't try to go to paradise, or you'll be stuck there forever. It looks like / you'll be changed physically and mentally. Wow. I don't know. Whatever the lesson is just be careful of your decisions, guys. Okay. So anyway, I hope you liked it. I've never heard of this story before, but it seems really, really good. So I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, bye.